and with Tourmaline, and then
Can you hear me?
yes.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm truly honored to be in the company of such luminaries and be participating. I'm gonna read my keynote and I'm just then excited to listen and be in conversation. So earlier this month, I visited my dear friend, the Black trans legend, Miss Major Griffin Gracie at her home in Little Rock, Arkansas. I met Miss Major nearly 2 decades ago in San Francisco when I was in my early 20s, a baby trans community organizer working for trans justice and abolition. Over the course of nearly 20 years, she became a mother and a mentor and a dear friend to me and many other girls. Together, we organized large convenings, including one in 2008, where we worked closely with Angela Davis to bring trans leadership into the forefront of the movement for prison abolition. We traveled all across this country together and the United Kingdom, took trains up and down the California coast, and made films together about the power of showing up as all of who you are in the everyday. Last week, Miss Major passed away in her home in Little Rock, which also serves as a strategic gathering place for members of our community to heal physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. With the support of the girls she mothered over decades and decades, along with the wider community, she had bought half an acre of land to form the Griffin Gracie Educational Retreat and Historical Center, or House of Gigi, as she called it, to serve as the oasis, which is literally called the oasis, focusing on supporting and nurturing the leadership of transgender people of color, transgender women, trans men, non-binary people of color living in the US South. When we learned she'd entered hospice care, we gathered in Miss Major's oasis and received the gift of our elder modeling leadership even in that moment of her life. We answered the call to be together in the midst of a mess of a thing, in a state where legislation has been passed making it illegal to offer care to all members of our community. Miss Major lived in one of 27 states that have enacted laws and policies limiting youth access to gender affirming care, imposing professional or legal penalties on healthcare practitioners supporting minors as well as trans adults, including trans people who are incarcerated. Even before the rollout of this legislation, Miss Major was called to Little Rock for precisely this reason, to be and to protect her community. I remember her telling me so powerfully maybe 10 years ago that she was following a spiritual calling in her head to move from San Francisco to Little Rock. She modeled for me that divine inspiration to listen to your institution and let your guides lead you. As Angela Davis said, I think our notions of what counts as radical have changed over time. Self care and healing and attention to the body and the spiritual dimension, all of this is now part of radical social justice struggles. That wasn't the case before. And I think that now we're thinking deeply about the connection between interior life and what happens in the social world. Even those who are fighting against state violence often incorporate impulses that are based on state violence in their relations with other people. I've been thinking so much about that Angela quote. Miss Major's House of Gigi is about creating that space to attend to the spiritual dimensions of our movement while releasing those impulses that are produced from living under the constant threat of state violence. Miss Major wrote about this in her book, Miss Major Speaks, as well as in her 1990s newsletter, Dear Glamour Girls. But even before she began writing about community care, she put in the work through grassroots organizing. Miss Major started doing this work in the 60s alongside another luminary, Marsha P. Johnson, another member of the movement who shared the same gift of listening to your inner guidance. Marcia frequently recalled how something in her head, her own spiritual guide, called her to queer life and queer community, despite growing up in a moment where the depictions and mass culture of queer people were either non existent or incredibly demeaning. Undeterred, Marcia sought answers, and she found herself along the way. For those who aren't familiar with Marcia, she is perhaps most famously known for her role in the 1969 Stonewall Uprising, when LGBTQIA plus people stood up against ritualized police violence and fought back for the right to dance, gather, celebrate, and show up fully as themselves. Marcia was among the leaders of this historic movement, along with activists like Miss Major and Sylvia Rivera, which has lifted Marcia's legacy into the collective consciousness despite this administration's current attempts to rewrite our shared history. Marcia's legacy, however, is far bigger than a single moment. Hers is a story of radical imagination, of faith in the unseen, and a bold joy in the face of the harshest conditions. Like Miss Major, she shares a similar resilience, love, and achieved sorry. Like Miss Major, it is a story of resilience, love, and family achieved by knowing oneself and being known. And Marcia's legacy is carried forward by all of us, by the bold joy and brave imagination of young people and older people across this country. Marcia was described by her dear friend Sylvia Rivera as living in her own realm. She saw things through different eyes. Those were eyes that were a gift, a necessary lens to perceive not only the brutal conditions that she and her friends endured, and she was so tuned to, but also to see through and beyond those conditions to what could and ought to exist. Marcia felt a deep sense of responsibility and care for her beloved street queens as they would gather in hourly hotels, the only places they could afford at the time. They called them hot springs because the radiators blasted so hard that no matter the season, you sweated. And yet, inside those overheated rooms, they dreamed. They imagined a world where they weren't exiled, harassed by police, and could walk outside in daylight without fear, where they were seen, safe, and loved. It would be difficult to overstate the harshness of the conditions that Marcia was facing in that era. But by working, loving, and building within her community, she achieved staggering accomplishments, co creating street transvestite action revolutionaries that provided free housing to trans people in need, going on international tours as a performance artist and a singer, and serving as inspiration for artists like Andy Warhol. What could have fueled such remarkable achievements in the face of such profound violence, oppression, and erasure? The answer can be found in Marcia's expansive and beautiful life. She believed in the power of joy to fuel imagination, in turn, fueling dreams that draw resources, community, and power as they grow. These are freedom dreams, like my former thesis advisor when I first wrote about Marcia in 2005, Robin D.G. Kelly, writes about the kind that blossoms not only in moments of comfort, but also when the world feels incredibly impossible. In 2025, we collectively face our own harsh circumstances. But studying Marcia over the past 2 decades has led me to the n- most fulfilling freedom dreams and relationships, like the one I have with Miss Major, and has taught me that dreaming is a discipline, that laughing, caring, performing, and giving are actually political acts, and that the world we want, one where we feel safe, held, and celebrated, start in our imagination, and imagination is powerful. We are living in a time when books like Miss Major Speaks and Marcia, The Joy and Defiance of Marsha B. Johnson are being banned, and the very idea of trans joy is under attack. But what I've learned from Miss Major and Marcia is that when the world is hostile to your light, that is the time to turn it up even brighter. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tourmaline. Dr. Story.
Yes, I loved that. Thank you so much for that gift. I was just going to read some of my book as to why I decided to write the book, particularly in this time and in this space. Just to explain kind of where I'm coming from. For me, like writing this book was really, really difficult because I wanted to do two things with the book. I wanted to, one, call out gay racism, call out anti-trans sentiment that exists in LGBTQ communities that I was witnessing since I came out and since I started going to the gay nightclub, with the fake ID, and I wanted to go and be in this space full of queer and trans people and feel free. And I did in some senses, right? But then as I started going to larger clubs or bigger clubs or just got older in queer life, I was hearing fetishized erotic types for cis white gay men to describe their attractions to other races of people. I was hearing the T word. I was hearing all of these pejorative things in these spaces that I thought were, I guess I think I assumed when I was young that and maybe because I'm queer myself, but I just felt like queers were more sophisticated, right? Like queer people are above it all, yeah, baby. We don't get down in the mire of racism and misogyny and these things that deny humanity, right? We recognize the humanity in ourselves and in one another, and I was naive in that, and so I wanted to do that. I wanted to say something about that in a way that connected it to scholarship and the world that we existed in as queer and trans people. But I also wanted to celebrate those activists and those artists, particularly Black and Latinx LGBTQ folk, who were already working as their own social and political interventions in a time, as Tourmaline just said, at a time where it was really, really hostile. And it's almost as if we're now back in this space of that same kind of hostility with police violence, state violence, desperation, hopelessness. And I wanted to highlight that work of those folk in the book because they were basically reacting to a hostile time, and they reacted to it with Black joy, with queer empowerment, with Latinx pride. I mean, so like I wanted to do that. I didn't want to just have the one conversation that focused on the harm that comes within our community and outside of it, but also the empowerment that is there inside and outside. And I think it's so especially important now in the time that we're in where we see trans folk being, seen as a political liability or being erased from public, or the attack on trans joy, the attack on immigrants, the attack on, um, the attack on schools, the attack on books, all of these things to me are really in the interest of denying not just Black, queer, and trans humanity, but all of our humanity. It's almost meant to make us feel defeated and powerless. And so we have to be able to look back at the blueprint. We have to be able to look at Miss Major. We have to be able to look at Marsha. We have to be able to look at Stormy. We have to be able to look at Victoria Cruz and all these, Sylvia, right? All these folks who knew the power of multi, right, cross-racial, cross-national organizing, and how if we come together with our freedom and liberation in mind, and that means economic freedom, spiritual freedom, healing, all of these things, right? This kind of full dimensionality of the human spirit, not just this idea that we can have our pride parades and we can like go gay shopping, right? So I also wanted to talk about how this kind of commodified idea of queer and trans identities that's propagated through mainstream media in a lot of ways, it has this neoliberal spin, and how it's now in our community now, right? Where our power, we're being told by society, by our government, by schools, that our power is in our ability to buy and purchase, our ability to acquire, our ability to have, right? And that's where our power is, which in as an economic theory and philosophy, it obscures all of these other identifiers, which are very important and key to us really becoming free, right? So you can't, neoliberalism is something that says ignore race. It doesn't matter. Ignore class, it doesn't matter because one day you'll just be able to buy the sweater, right? And maybe you'll be able to buy the sweater and it's a gay sweater at Pride, right? And then you're free to do those kinds of things. So I wanted to kind of do a mashup of sorts on how all of these things are problematic, and we really need to like practice Sankofa in terms of reaching back to the blueprint that this is a time that we haven't. I know that some of us feel right now that we're living in a time that we've never witnessed, but we have. Even if we haven't witnessed it with our eyes, we've witnessed it through reading the stories of our ancestors, right? And reading the stories of the luminaries that existed before the luminaries exist now. So we know what is at stake and what it takes. And this idea that somehow racism when it's queer is permissible because queerness is taboo in and of itself. And I think that this is I was just tired. I was tired of seeing blackface drag queens at pride events, being like verbally accosted in nightclubs. So I was really really sick of that, and I was sick of the lack of accountability from white cis gays, and lesbians in particular, who just didn't care about economic struggles. And when I was researching this book, it seemed as if they didn't care then either. And in fact, their impetus to even collaborate with Black and Latinx LGBTQ folks was really Stonewall, was really police violence made these white queer folks see, it's not just gender and sexual tyranny, it's also these other things that the state and local governments and federal are trying to deny for me. And so I felt like I wanted to talk about that. So like even because I felt that what I was witnessing going to contemporary prides and in queer spaces was there was a particular ownership I felt and a particular air from white cis queers that this is their space, that pride is theirs, that queerness is them. And when people think of queerness, they think of whiteness and they think of wealth and they think of all of these other things that aren't reflective, nor have they ever been, of our actual communities. So I wanted to be sure and talk about that and call attention to that. And I think that autoethnography is a really powerful tool. I feel like most of us luminaries use it in the sense of looking at our own selves and our own conditions, inner and outer, and making sense of our world, and then trying to help others make sense of their worlds, why they suffering, why they might be privileged in some aspect or not. And it to me falls in line with the Black feminist intellectual tradition of making the personal political, especially when we look at folks like Lorde, right? And Lorde's work of centering her own life and her own experiences to connect to larger, broader social political issues. And I wanted to do that with the book because I knew, for one, that I wasn't the first person who dealt with this, and I wouldn't be the last person either. So I wanted Black, Latinx, Indigenous, LGBTQ folks to see the book as an affirmation that I see you and I know what you have to go through to be yourself. And even in spaces that claim that these are spaces where you can be yourself. So I know what's at stake in that. So I wanted them to see it as an affirmation in that regard. And, I wanted to read the white cis gays and lesbians because I just feel like and that to me is keeping up with the tradition. That's keeping up with Pat Parker, with Kathy Cohen and June Jordan, and right Essex Hemphill. I mean, this is the Black queer and trans intellectual tradition is very much about that. It's a both and thing. It's not only about calling out harmful systems, calling out harmful organizations, but it's also about functioning as an affirmation for the people that you reflect, for other Black queer and trans folk, right? So I wanted to do those things with it. I know I didn't talk for that long, but I decided against reading. I was like, nah.
No, that was great. Thank you.
Literally, yeah.
So we have plenty of time for a conversation and probably even for a Q&A. I think it's a good place to start off, Dr. Story, with your mention of autoethnography, which I know is central to, and if you haven't, I think everyone should definitely, I got the opportunity to read all of their work, the March of the Joe and Defiance of Marsha P. Johnson and The Rainbow Ain't Never Been Enough, and One Day in June, so I definitely recommend. But in both of your publications, storytelling is really an important tool in describing the lived experience of queer people of color, especially in activist movements. It's really important to me as a researcher and someone interested in social movements, as I'm sure is important to a lot of the people attending the symposium. So, if you could speak a little bit about what makes storytelling such a powerful strategy in our fight for queer and trans liberation.
No, yes. I've always felt like for us, for storytelling for queer and trans people is our counterspell. Okay. I see it as a counterspell in our communities like fight for liberation because it ignites the mind, it creates community and connection, it invigorates our heart, our spirit. Just hearing a story, listening in on a story, getting the tea. I mean, it does something almost metabolically to the body, and especially our stories, like hearing our stories, telling our stories and writing our stories. It really can be transcendental to me. It can make us soar. It can make us, open our hearts. I think that, it was stories of folks that came before me, Black queer people that came before me, Black trans people came before me, Black films, right? That made me feel like, yes, like hearing that story, witnessing that story, seeing that story, it made me feel like I can do that. I can feel good about myself. I can feel empowered about myself. And so I wanted to do that for other people, right? That's my whole aim for my students, from everyone, just that be yourself, right? And have so much fun with that. And I think in this particular moment in our country and our community, our stories they aid in helping others to see themselves, and imagine what our future stories will tell or how they should be told. So like, um they fed me, and I feel like they're a huge crux. I think that stories um are just so powerful in order to change minds, hearts, or to reinvigorate them. And then of course the imagination itself, which I feel like we need that imagination right now. Right now we need the imagination.
Yeah, no, very similar. Um, I remember I was a welfare rights organizer in New York City for Queers for Economic Justice, and it was that we had this big campaign where, you know, LGBTQIA plus low income New Yorkers couldn't go into the welfare office without so often being turned away, and being told like, no, come back when you look like a man, or no, come back when you look like a woman, like even to get your small benefits that you were entitled to here in New York City. And so we had this campaign around it. And one of the things that we did was we started to document our stories. And we didn't know what we were doing at the time. And this was, the early 2000s. And Kogenda Marungi, who was part of the group, had made a film before. And they were like, okay, we're gonna film it. So we passed around this like camcorder, and then it just started to grow and grow, we like went to Southerners on New Ground reunion in 2008. We all got in a car and drove down, um, and we started to feel like, oh, we are documenting our lives, our stories, and it's so powerful. And then we were doing it, passing that camcorder for years, and then in 2010 it culminated in us like making this film. We didn't know that's what we were doing at the time. We just thought we were in that tradition of storytelling, of about our lives. And the film's called Taking Freedom Home. And I remember it screened in July of 2010 at the LGBT Center here in New York. And it felt so incredible to be, there were maybe 30 people in that room. And it just felt like the most incredible movie premiere I'd ever been to. And I we were because we were sharing our stories with each other, right? Like the audience was us. Um, and to have that level of reflection back of our beauty and our value and our worthiness was so transformative at a time when I didn't fully understand. It really helped me because I was working on policy and structures and systems, and all those things are so important. But what storytelling does for me is it shifts our interior condition, right? Which Angela Davis was talking about, right? Like our interior condition is shifted through stories. And how we feel about ourselves is shifted through stories. So to me, that's the lineage and the legacy that I want to be part of. So
Thank you. As I was reading both of your books, um, I was it was really interesting to learn about the history of racism and transphobia in queer social movements, seeing seeing the things that happened in like the 60s and 70s, and even some of the more contemporary examples that you note in your book, Dr. Story. Um, it was some of the things like, wow, it's cyclical, it's still happening like right now. And we're seeing it today with the rhetoric right now around like the LGBT community and the removal of queer and trans people from our own spaces. So I was wondering, what can the activism and community work from the trans and queer people of color from that era inform about our current approaches to responding to what I would say is an abandonment from our community, what we can like learn from our ancestors and elders?
No, yes, and that's such an excellent question. And I do like to me, like, and I feel like I say this in different ways in the book, but I always say queerness requires a politic to me. It's the queerness isn't no happenstance, it's not an addendum, it's a way of life, right? And not like, lifestyle. Not the way the homophobic children use it, but in terms of like it being a particular way that we see the world, the social and political lens that one utilizes to make sense of their environment. And so I think that folks now who want to take away the tea have a lot to learn from the 70s and 80s, from Sylvia, right, who takes the stage in Christopher Street and they throw stuff at her and they say, all these awful things to her. And she's like, y'all quiet down. This is like Sylvia and Marsha are my favorites because I mean they're like dealing with vitriol like right in their face. And Sylvia's like, hey, quiet down. Like, shut your ass up. I mean, very simply in that regard. And of course we knew that she was doing work with the Young Lords and this kind of cross organizing and this wonderful coalition work because she saw those things tethered, right? Her and Marsha both, they saw them tethered together. They knew the injurious effects of racism. They knew what that meant for Black and Latinx teens who were queer and young. Um, and they fought against those things and not just about give me my gender and sexual freedom, but give me my racial freedom, give me my economic freedom, give me my affordable housing freedom, right? All of these things need to be in place if we're going to have this kind of true liberation. And so like when I'm the log cabin gays, I think they call themselves, or the normal gays, or the log cabin Republican gays, I don't know what they foolish name is, but for someone like them, I saw that and I thought of Crystal LaBeija when she says, I have a right to show my color. I'm beautiful, right? And I know I'm beautiful, and so again, calling out racism, calling out anti-Blackness. And I feel like in this moment, we can go back to that blueprint. We can go back to these folks before us who routinely called out injustice, who called out anti-Blackness, just make it plain. Let's not excuse it because this is a queer space and there's not that many, or this is, and I mean that's usually the response, right? Like, oh, this is a queer dive bar. We know you experience racism, but it's one of our only spots in the city. And it's like, yeah, I get that, but I don't want the only spot in the city to be a racist queer spot in the city. Period. You see what I'm saying? And this is these are the responses from that. I think of Pat Parker who wanted to bring all herselves in one room and said it's a revolution. And I think we can continue this legacy through our art and our writing and our protests. We can continue to make plain the right to be, because who we are is not wrong. And I also go back to Baldwin, right? So I'm going to read this from Baldwin because I always got to get Baldwin right because he's so shady in his quote. He goes, yes, I just love Baldwin. He says, I think white gay people feel cheated because they were born in principle in a society in which they were supposed to be safe. The anomaly of their sexuality puts them in danger unexpectedly. Their reaction seems to me in direct proportion to their sense of feeling cheated of the advantages which accrue to white people in a white society. And so Baldwin's like, look, the gag is y'all thought y'all was white and y'all just happened to be queer, or y'all was white and y'all happened to be trans, right? Like when I think of like a Caitlyn Jenner, right? Again, right, living her truth and yet holding racial animus, classist views, like having the wrong politic. And so to me, like there needs to be some type of politic. It's not just like I'm a person existing in the world, happen to be gay, happen to be non-binary, it's not a big deal, doesn't matter. I mean, it's like, yes, it does matter. It does matter. And at this critical time, we cannot afford to see anyone in our community. And this is what our ancestors called out before. We can't afford to make anyone a political liability, all of us or none of us, period. It can't be that not the non-binary children, not the trans children, and this is the problem is that they're going to come for y'all eventually, right? Because now all the cis gays is up in arms behind same-sex marriage. You know what I'm saying? They ain't said nothing, right? All of this anti-trans stuff, all of this awful, disgusting behavior, right? Including from some cis gays. And now it's like, oh, same-sex marriage is on the table. Uh-oh. We're nothing like, right? And then they're still trying to use this stance of like, well, I'm this kind of gay. So they're literally practicing this backward respectability politics. It's like respectability politics ain't for you, just like it ain't for black people. It's not for nobody. It's like, and so I think that we can look to that activism, those initiatives, and even the methods that they used to call out, whether it was shady or seem petty or whatever. Hey, I feel like that it's so inspiring to think about what the folks before us went through and how they persevered and thrived despite what they were, right? And so, yeah, I think there's so much to learn. And a lot of that is, again, coalition building, multiracial coalition building, multi-gender coalition building. No one should be left out in this moment. Only the people who hold animus, misogynist, racist, white supremacists, yeah, lead them out. We don't need them. But the other folks who don't see themselves as such, then they need to be with us and not try to sever parts of our community like that's somehow going to give us favor. It's so silly.
That makes me remember, how the first Pride celebrating 1 year after Stonewall it was actually called the Christopher Street Liberation Day March, right? And it ended on purpose at the Women House of Detention Center because members of the Black Panther Party were currently being held there. And they arrived there chanting, "Free our sisters, free ourselves," right? And there was a deep understanding of oppression and liberation being inextricably linked with all of the communities. And Sylvia and Marcia were, the architects of that first Christopher Street Liberation Day March. and then went on right after to occupy New York University. Because New York University was one refusing to allow for queer life at the university, and then also operating Bellevue, which was forcibly holding queer, trans, gender nonconforming people against their will. And so while they were in this occupation, they were writing this manifesto. And I remember in the early 2000s when Robin D.G. Kelly was my professor and my thesis advisor back in 2005 when I was first writing about Marsha's legacy. And his book on freedom dreams had such a profound effect on me. And I really wanted to, it launched so many desires. About knowing how Black, queer, and trans people are actually also part of the Black radical tradition, right? And so, just was like in those libraries. And I remember finding this manifesto that Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries wrote in the basement of New York University. And at that time, this is 1970, right? September 1970, they were showing up for the Young Lords, as you said, the Black Panther Party, as you said, and they were writing this manifesto, making demands, right, saying we want access to gender affirming care, just like we want free childcare, just like we want free tuition and open enrollment, and an end to psychiatric holds of queer and trans and gender nonconforming people at Bellevue, right? They were in study in that kind of Fred Moten undercommon sense, right? They were being in study with each other. And so that was the further realization of that study session that they were doing in those hot spring hotel rooms in Times Square, where they were renting those hourly hotel rooms and being together and asking each other questions like, when can I go outside with a greater sense of safety or a greater sense of ease? And they were really encouraging each other to ask those questions, speculate, ask the same question again and again and again, getting deeper each time. And so to me, it's so beautiful to reach for those lessons that are continuing to grow and grow and grow from the people who came before, like the Marshas, the Andoras, the Sylvias, the Miss Majors, the Stormays. Miss Major and Stormay were also performing together in the Jewel Box Review in this time, right, in Times Square. And Stormé is the person who brought Miss Major to the Stonewall Bar for the very first time. And so you don't have to look hard to see these connections, right? Like our history is so powerful and is offering us these lessons all the time. And to me, that's why I'm trying to cultivate a deeper relationship with my intuition, my sense of like listening or that guidance in my head, that spiritual dimension, that interior condition, because that has consistently led me to being at the right place at the right time with the right people to learn, to be in study, and to help launch new freedom dreams that move us in the direction of what is wanted. So,
Thank you. Um, I was just in someone's class the last week, and she was teaching about censorship and children's literature, which is a really big thing that's happening, especially queer books. And I really enjoyed One Day in June. I don't think I ever read any like queer children's book when I was growing up, if they were available. But uh, why is it important for us to have these youth-oriented stories like One Day in June? Right now, especially as we're thinking about so much book banning and like whitewashing of our curriculum, especially in K through 12 education.
yeah, I mean, I wanted to write a book, and I should say, it's beautifully illustrated by Charlotte Christensen, and so much of that story is Charlotte Christensen's incredible um, illustrations of re-speech, which is, a historically queer, gender nonconforming people of color beach in New York City, right, where we get to be all of who we are and show up and show out as ourselves. And so it starts in re-speech because to me, it is so important for little ones and their caretakers, right? And their parents and caretakers, mentors to have stories that share our lives, right? And ultimately it's one day in June that leads up to the rally for Black trans lives at Brooklyn Museum, where my friend, the incredible writer and organizer Raquel Willis, is leading a chant, I believe in Black trans power. And so to me it was one of the ways to do that counterspell, as Dr. Story was offering, right? Where we are healing our interior and also having a sense of enthusiasm around it, right? Like learning from the joy of being in the water from with an elder, right? Who is, it opens with an elder talking about like, do you know about Marcia? Reese Beach was a beach that Marcia went to all the time, right? Like again, these histories of our like ancestors are right here. So it's a story of Marsha B. Johnson and her legacy. Um, of mutual aid, of care, of showing up and showing out, is fully available if we tune to it, right? It's as more alive than ever. Like Marcia is more alive than ever. And so to me, that was also a really important part of the book of like, how do we listen? How do we cultivate an openness to hearing our ancestors in this present moment while we can find them through acts of care, through showing up and showing out, through organizing, through levity, right? Through basking and replenishment. And to me, those are so important to um, offer to our young ones. Yeah, and their entire community.
Thank you. And it is beautifully illustrated. It's such a cute book. I really enjoy Dr. Story, how neoliberalism is interwoven in your book, especially as it like relates to queer representations in media and media about queer people. I wonder if you could speak a little bit more about how you're seeing neoliberalism infiltrating queer spaces and media and what strategies or practices might be effective for dismantling that political landscape.
Yeah, this is like excellent. I mean, I've never had the best question. I mean, Erin, these are like the best questions. They're really, really thoughtful. Yeah, I talk a lot about it. The idea of neoliberalism, and the myth behind it, and the myth behind the free market, and all of these kinds of things. But what it essentially does is that it turns us from, citizens to consumers, and then it turns us into a subject position like a human being into a commodified something, right? And so like I started seeing examples of this. One of the biggest and first that I saw was that horrible film Stonewall. What is it, in 2015? um which is this kind of whitewashed version of the 1969 like uprisings. And so the film converts the Stonewall Inn to like a mostly like white gay cis bar. So there were no other folks there. It also centers this white cis gay man from like the Midwest. I think he's from the Midwest, like this kind of random white boy from the Midwest, like grabs this brick, and he's the first protagonist of the uprisings. And so it's like girl, that movie was such a fool. And the fact that they kept advertising, and then the trailer and all of this, and I'm like, okay, so you're just going to completely obliterate Black trans folk who were there that night, who had been working in and around those communities, right? Performing, living life with people. So they're just going to completely erase them. And so it was a really like ahistorical and really cinematically violent depiction of the origins of our queer liberation. And this isn't somehow not dangerous. That's the issue for me, is that I don't know what the filmmaker's response to the backlash of it was, but it to me is like an unacceptable example. And when you have a neoliberal politic, and then that's coupled with gay racism, and then that's coupled with transphobia, then you're getting this kind of generational indoctrination of basically a homonormative person or an apolitical gay, someone who happens to be gay, someone who happens to be trans. They might be white, they might not, but none of those things matter because none of those things should be rooted in resistance or rooted in a politic or rooted in a fight for freedom, right? It's just the fight is what sweater to get, what coffee brand to choose, and those things. And so that's like one example. Like another example, to me is like stop asking Caitlyn Jenner things about politics. Like just stop because just stop asking her about what's going on. You know what I mean? And I think that that is a symptom, right? And it's similar to like going to ask the Amigos. What's that little rap group, the Los Amigos or what? They know what they're gonna say about LGBTQ stuff. So the reporters, journalists, they know what these folks who have, they know exactly what they're gonna say, what they're gonna give, and they want to give that perception. They want to show that there's all this homophobia, that all of this homophobia and transphobia within Black communities. They want to show a white trans woman who's like racist and classist and in some ways like unbothered by the harm that classist and racist views create as well, right? And so that's what I mean when I talk about it in the book. It's a politically neutered and social compliant queer trans person. And we're seeing them too much, and there's too many. But they are politically neutered and they're socially compliant. And so instead of dispelling ideas around homonormativity, instead of dispelling ideas around transphobia or homophobia, they as gays or trans people themselves actually promote and propagate these things by singling themselves out as an individual who I'm gay, but not like those other gays. I'm trans, right? And this is what Jenner has done, right? I'm trans, but I totally understand what the administration is doing with other trans folk, right? So that's neoliberalism, gay racism, and all of this kind of anti-trans, anti-queer stances that people house. And so to me, I don't want you in my community. No. Like, no. Like that's harmful, right? Because now you embody an identity that's either similar to mine or in community with mine, and you're bringing in these harmful perceptions and ideas. You see me as a political liability because of either race or whatever, or respectability, whatever you want to call it. And that's how harmful neoliberalism is to LGBTQ communities. And I hate that it's really catching on the idea of rugged individualism, buying and purchase power. And that's all that we care about. It's absurd, you know? So that's why I really wanted to bring it up because it was just too much going on where I kept seeing stuff like that where they would be like, yeah, let's talk to the Los Amigos about gay Black people. And it's like, let's not. Let's talk to a professor or let's talk to an artist or a community worker or an activist, right? Who has a queer liberationist politic. Why not seek those folks out? Okay, I know why you're not seeking them. You don't want to be because you want everybody to think that, queerness shouldn't be a politic. It should be about purchasing something and that's it and that's all. Because if it's a politic, then you're going to push back against all of the anti-trans and anti-queer stuff in our society. And we can't have that. We can't have that, right? So that's why I really oh, and then even thinking about a more contemporary example, the child Barry Weiss, who becomes the new editor-in-chief of CBS News, who's anti-trans, but a lesbian. Ain't she lesbian? I don't know if she's a lesbian, but she's certainly queer. She identifies as queer, but she anti-trans. I'm so tired of that. I'm so tired of these fake ass lesbians, these fake feminists being anti-trans. Like, girl, go the fuck on with that. Excuse my French. I don't want to, I'm cursing. See, this is why it gets late and I start cursing. But I think of Barry Weiss becoming chief of CBS News. And then just recently at the International Trans Woman Queen pageant, where they had the Black American winner, stunning Monet, and she was publicly snubbed at this trans woman pageant by her other contestants because I think it was Miss Cuba became visibly upset because she was the runner up. Monet won the top category and she was visibly upset. So all of the contestants went and corralled around the woman from Cuba who was white passing. and not Monet, who's a Black American and who actually like won the crown. So I mean, that was a like really violent and public, huge display of racial animus at an all trans pageant. And so this is what to me is really disturbing and troubling, is that more and more queer and trans folk feel as if I'm queer, but that's a kind of addendum, or I'm trans, whatever, and they want to still hold really problematic views around class and around race, and they feel like that's fine as long as I have this. And it's like, well, you can't be a queer liberationist if you're also racist, right, and classist, and right. You participate in body shaming. I mean, I just don't see how liberation can have anything to do with that. And I think that neoliberalism is the thing that makes those folk feel as if they're still like queer minded, even though they're doing all of this harmful stuff.
Thank you. I am also tired of seeing Caitlyn Jenner run her mouth. And so I live for any time a trans woman of color on social media drags her because it's deserved. Before I ask my last question, I just, since we have time, there should be a Q&A function. So if you want to, I invite people to formulate some questions that we can ask Tourmaline and Dr. Story. I wanted to end with kind of like looking at the things for the symposium, and you both have kind of mentioned that part of the work of this anti-trans and anti-queer rhetoric is to make us feel hopeless. But in our current climate of this kind of rhetoric and violence, I'm wondering how you see us looking towards creativity and community to find moments of joy and love in our current violent climate.
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, Marsha is a really powerful example of that. She wasn't putting a happy face sticker over the real problems that existed, but she was allowing herself more and more consistently to say, oh, like, police officer, you don't get to determine how I feel about me, right? Like, taking that power back is so incredible. And part of what I've learned so much about Marsha is her consistent practice of cultivating joy as a means of resistance, knowing that in her joy, she had a greater sense of clarity about the very real problems that existed, and a greater sense of clarity about how to transmute a problem into a solution. And she also knew, like, one of the lessons that I've taken from her life is that you can't go from feeling incredibly afraid to joy all the time, right? There's some steps in between. And for her, rage, righteous indignation, turning over the table was a really important way back to the fullness of who she was, which was like in her clarity and in her power and in her joy. And so those steps, like Stonewall, was nothing if it wasn't a collective moment of rage to return to a knowing of your power, right? After the like routine and ritualized enforcement of New York's 3 article of clothing laws that said, like, if you were a trans or gender nonconforming person, you had to be wearing 3 articles of clothes that are associated with the gender you're assigned at birth. That law in New York City stayed on the books until 2020, right? Like, so we're living in the very real, immediate afterlife of these forms of legislation. So all that to say, like, Marcia had real consistent practices. So did Miss Major, like performing with Storm around cultivating joy and cultivating like the opening the apparatus to let more of themselves into the world and more of themselves into their physical bodies. And so to me, I try to take some lessons from that, whether it's Miss Major, I remember like this is like 15 years ago or something, she was talking about like, can we get pleasure from just enjoying a cool drink of water, right? Like, can we just, with some ice cubes in it, like, how luxurious and joyful can just sitting with a glass of water be? And I was like, a glass of water? Like, what are you talking about? But she really got me thinking about, like, oh, that can be we can find joy and luxury and pleasure, like a feeling of luxuriating or a feeling of basking in the smallest things, which actually are those big, profound things. And so then we made a film together called The Personal Things, and it was just about the ways that she was finding to personally resist, right? Personally resist the state. And also to find her joy. And she was talking about this journey of, putting on her looks as a child and running out to the back door and then running back inside, or running to the gate and then running back inside, and then finally like stepping onto the street. And so these kinds of like growing our capacity to feel and experience joy are so important to movements for transformation and liberation. And Marsha's performances, she was making those banners, she was making the looks for Star. She was doing 2 shows a day, as a performer with the Hot Peaches. To me, that was her actively also cultivating joy. I found just in my own life, the more I cultivate joy in my life, the more I can also have clarity about turning a problem into a solution, right? And that's really meaningful. Like to me, I get to plug into my full power, and also I think it's really important to not put pressure on myself or anyone else about like feeling joy all the time when you can open a screen or talk to a loved one or go outside without the harsh conditions immediately facing you. But I also know things like taking a nap, or for me, it's like listening to Laraji or meditating or talking to a friend or drinking that water that I now understand what Mitch Major was talking about, right? Um, is a daily practice of what Marsha was saying, like, you don't get to determine how I feel about me. So that's
That was absolutely beautiful. I love that. Yes, icy water. I got my icy water. Yes. And it does feel, it feels luxurious, and it does. I mean, I love an old crisp. Yes, I love that. And I think that, I went into the session earlier to watch the Happy Birthday Marsha film again, and I had seen it before, but I love it, and I wanted to watch it again. And this like third time watching it, that is the thing that resonated with me the most, is that the one scene where Marsha's like, hey, let me in Stonewall, and he's like, well, what are you doing here, and you can't come in here. And then she's like, of course I can come in here. I'm the headliner tonight. It's like, I loved the I love the audacity in Marsha's story so much. And you're absolutely right. Like whatever the state, whatever the police, whatever, street harassers in New York City, it did not stop her from, showing up as herself, and directly responding back to that. I love that. Like, of course I'm going to be here because I'm the headline. Like, instead of, not this like, oh, I don't know. And I think it's a thing of both, because I do. There's some days where I'm watching the news, or I'm scrolling, and I just feel so defeated. I'm just like, this just seems like this is never ending. Like I was telling the group earlier before the talk started, it feels like emotional terrorism every single day in some type of way. So many people, are suffering, and myself included, just emotionally seeing what's happening, and what's going on. And so it's just so difficult to know that, and then to also try and ignite the joy in you, or to give joy to others. And so I love um, you saying, what you said about the steps. Right, you don't go from rage and sadness to just joy. I love that, and I've never thought about it like that, but I think that, yeah, so there's some days where I'm like completely despondent. I don't really feel hopeful. And then if I feel lots of despair, I'll either take a walk. I like to walk and see what kind of animals I can see. It's like a game to me because I live in a real woodsy area, so I want to see either deer or bunny. Sometimes I've seen foxes. I'm really into animals and like the natural world. So that really gives me a lot of joy. And just even seeing people's dogs or the cats, because cats love to be outside, and so I like pet them, and like I'm touching all these random people's animals on the street. But I mean, that brings me joy. It's cathartic. It calms my blood pressure down, the walking, the animal interaction, and then just chilling out, like chilling out with my wife, chilling out with my dog, or my best friend. I love to we always call it speak on the phone, but I love to still speak on the phone like it's the 90s, like I don't really do the FaceTime a lot. Like sometimes I will, but but I love to just like talk on the phone and have a good conversation. And so some of those things, the real like simple, accessible things in my little sphere, I try to engage and indulge when I'm feeling um despair or just feeling overwhelmed by what's happening in the world. I try to get into those things to calm myself down and just calm my central nervous system down. I feel like now that I'm like 45 too, like I feel like, and as an intellectual and like I think when we are thinkers, a lot of times we just ignore our metabolic system. And I know I did in my 20s because I was like young and 20, I didn't care. But like now I'd be like, damn, I'm out of breath. Or I'm like, damn, I'm sweating. Or like, hold on, let me calm down. Like I feel enraged. Like I feel like I can feel the pressure going up. I can feel it, So like, yeah. So like being like that, like being attentive to that. Because I'm not gonna, there's no good that's gonna come of me being wore out and all this kind of stuff. So trying to be cognizant of that, not to fall into despair, because this time it's so you can, but and also accessing those things. Yeah.
Thank you. Um, if anyone has any questions, we have a few minutes. You can use the Q&A feature. Okay, we have one question. Your favorite Black queer trans media show, artist, etc.
Right now, my favorite. Well, I do love Lena Waithe. I love what Lena Waithe has been doing.
Yeah.
I love 20s. I love Master of None season 5. I love what Waithe is doing right now. Certainly that with with the work that she's doing, I love it. I'm trying to think of other faves. And my other fave, because it's like I know I have some in my mind. Let me think. What did I just watch? I feel like Wade, of course, Terrell Alvin McCraney, Barry Jenkins, like with Moonlight and all that. Oh my God, Ian Patrick Polk, because
Yeah.
right, I mean, one from the Skinny and all those stuff back in the day, but now he's also doing. I think he's exec producer for P Valley, and so I guess P Valley's gonna finally come back, honey. It's gonna come back with season 3. It's been like 7 years, but it's finally gonna come back. I feel like season 3, I love what they're doing with that show. There's a lot of I love the Miss Pat show, even though Tammy Roman just pissed me off. But I mean I was gagging. I was gagging because her role as the auntie in the Miss Pat show, I loved it because Miss Pat has the oldest daughter who's a lesbian, and I mean, that the character that Tammy Roman plays is exquisite. And so it was really disheartening to hear about her and Jazz and how she's uncomfortable, being that she don't want the Jazz's girlfriend at their graduation anyway. So, so not so much for her, but I did like the show. Miss Pat was great.
If folks haven't read Miss Major Speaks, I just really encourage, in terms of like media, I mean that book is so powerful and it holds so many different stories, like the story of Stormy taking Miss Major to Stonewall for the first time, of their performances, just the life and legacy of organizing inside Attica after the riots, of learning from revolutionary. It's just is so powerful. So I just really encourage people to check out that book.
And then we had another question. Speaking of queer of color joy, what are your favorite Black, Latinx, Indigenous genre novels?
Well, they're so old. My favorite novels are just so old, but like I love Women in Brewster Place by Gloria Naylor. And even though the whole book is not a queer book, but I love the two. I've been obsessed with them since I was a little kid, and I saw Women in Brewster Place as like a mini series on television. Oh my God. And they were lesbians and
Yeah,
loved it. And I love Color Purple, even though Walker right now, Walker is but the Color Purple when she wrote it back then. The character of Sugar Avery has always really resonated with me. I absolutely love anything, and I repeat anything that Toni Morrison ever writes, even if her
yeah,
characters are not queer. They're just
yeah.
so amazing and robust that I just think she's one of the greatest novelists we've ever had. And so anything by her, I have a penchant for Beloved though. I love that. Even though like they're like, hey, what about the queer stuff? It's like none of it I'm listing is that. But it's like my favorite. Those are some of the things that I guess kind of propel me into like, you know what? I think I'm gay around here. So those were the materials that kind of got me into, I think.
Yeah, I relate to that so much. Like, I remember reading and then watching Women of Brewster Place and just being so, this is like, so shaped by, I don't know, it just really, it lives inside me. It's very alive. So in a similar way, like Octavia Butler, right? Really anything that Octavia Butler has written it has also transported the possibility. I remember reading what was then called the Xenogenesis series and then feeling like the a greater capacity to like shapeshift and give myself permission to be expansive in my body. Um, I've been reading the Legendborn series and yeah, I don't know. I feel like literature is really right now. I'm writing a novel, and so I'm trying to like read as much as possible. And yeah, so yeah, I relate to
Okay, those are the only two questions, so I think we can wrap up early. I just want to say I was so touched by both of your works. They meant a lot to me when I was reading them and preparing for this, so I'm so happy I got to hear from both of y'all about the work that you're doing. And I also hope that people who are attending, can attend the conference wrap up Black Feminist Benediction that's happening. You have about maybe like, I can't do math, but maybe like 30, 40, so, I don't know, minutes. But yes, thank you, Tourmaline and Dr. Story. It was wonderful getting the chance to speak with both of you.
Thank you. Thank you for moderating such a powerful conversation and those questions. Like,
I just, I'm like,
yeah,
oh my
thank you.
God,
They were
Erin,
so
thank
right.
you.
Yeah,
Thank you both. This has been
yeah.
a huge honor. I've had such a wonderful time. This has been a wonderful evening. Y'all both made my evening. Thank you so much.
Same, same.
Thank you so much, Erin, for your questions. People, I don't know if you
Mhm.
got to see what people in the chat talking about how great the questions were. I am, such a fan.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Kyla, and thank you, Tourmaline. I think we're just going to go right into the session, actually, because it's only 10 minutes. Gwen has agreed to join me. So I think we'll just go ahead because I believe it's on the same link, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. Um, So thanks, y'all. Gwen, and I are gonna just wrap up, and I thought I would start first by just letting um Gwen just have some say. So if people weren't here this morning, we put out a tribute video for Gwen. We'll drop the link in the chat for folks if you want to watch it. It's available on YouTube. We at the end of the last symposium of 2022, um, you know, Jackie Jones Worcester, who was our honoree, kind of closed us out. And so I was like, it's appropriate that Gwen would close us out. So she'll say her say, and then, I'll say whatever, I can with, whatever time is left. So Gwen,
Mhm.
there you go.
So, first of all, this last panel was amazing and the perfect close to this conference. So timely, so important, so many issues that we're grappling with as we try to build better coalitions and try to be better to each other. So, I feel so full after this last session, after the entire conference. Everything was amazing. And I just want to say that it takes a lot to surprise me. And so the tribute video definitely was a surprise. I was not expecting it. I'm still at a loss for like how to express how much um, you taking the time to talk to people that I care about, to add the boom bap throughout. Like everything from the beat to the words was just amazing. Every session I was able to attend in this symposium blew my mind, from the keynotes like this one to the TCU students that I watched asynchronously this afternoon. Just everything was amazing. And kudos to the CLC team and the Brown Chair for another amazing symposium. I don't even know what to say. When I wrote Check It While I Wreck It, I could have never imagined something like this. So thank you for just acknowledging the work while I can still say thank you. So thank you.
Thank you, Gwen.
I'm not
You
crying again, so
You did, and I'm not going to either. That's what you really want. You really want me to cry so that I can't stop. I can't keep coming for you in the text messages in the group chat about you crying earlier. But so that the way I'm not going to do it is I'm just not going to tell no stories. What I have to say to you has been said the last 2 days. I hope that you feel that. But I just I think the world of you, and of your work. I remember when I first met you was at Four Cs in 2004. It was my first Four Cs, and let me tell y'all the amazing thing. I'm at Denny's with Dr. E, Gwen, Dr. G, and I forget who else was there. There was a ton of people there. And Dr. G paid for everybody at Denny's. And it was like 1 o'clock in the morning, and we was like eating pancakes and stuff. And that is, the kind of just community that I wish everybody had. And it's that what everybody deserves, that kind of love, from folks with whom you have scholarly interests and pedagogical ones and all of that, but also like you just get to be folk. You get to feel like you home. It's kind of like when Kyla was like, I don't mean to cuss. And I was like, I was in the chat, cuss, you home, right?
and I was like, you good, you
Yeah,
good.
you good. And so, I speak, I'm not speaking just for me, but I think I can speak for everybody on our team. And that includes our advisory board. When I say and go back to, the guiding questions that led to the formation of the CLC, you know, and one that I think, you know, carries through everything, you know, we do, why we do it, how we collaborate, you know, with folks, goes back to like what I said when I gave my job talk, you know, in 2020, which is, you know, the question I was trying to answer was what happens when we make space for community accountability, ancestral listening, and a Black feminist love ethics as the hard work through which we tell new stories, create new concepts in the practice of community literacies. And so, you know, I've grown to think of this work, you know, as hard work, yes, but also heart work. And I really believe that it, you know, it reflects in many ways what Tourmaline was saying about Miss Major and just having that, and you know this, like this, like sort of listening to, you know, Spirit saying to go to Arkansas. Gwen knows this, a lot of other people know this. Like, you know, I was back in what I consider to be home. I was back in New York. Everybody was, my family was happy. Everybody was excited to have me. But, you know, when I had this opportunity and another opportunity, I prayed on it. And, you know, my partner prayed on it. And it was so clear that we were to come here and that there was something that I was supposed to do. And I know that, you know, this is the something, right? To, you know, collaborate and work with other people to create spaces like this one. And to do it, as one of my elders, Dr. Hazel Simonet, says, in spite of whatever, right? And now we dealing with whatever every single day, multiple times a day, and we're going to be here in spite of. And so I think the thing I just want to, you know, end on and stick with, like, you know, to the 10 minutes that I said that we would, it's just, you know, the presence of ancestral, you know, listening, you know, in that work. Tony K. Bambara has been all over this thing, you know, crafting the irresistible, as I said in the opening session, comes from her, you know, her quote, I think her prophecy, you know, that the job of the writer is to make, you know, revolution irresistible. I think it's, you know, the job of the artist is to make revolution irresistible. And you know, that is something that, you know, we try to, you know, create as the conditions under which people, you know, can do that and do it with joy and with love. And, you know, as was said in the last session, that doesn't mean magical thinking and pretending that what's happening isn't happening, right? It means that, you know, that we just persist, you know, in staying human, um, in spite of whatever. So I'll, you know, I'm a gratitude girl, so I'll just end on saying thank you to everyone who participated in however they participated, people who are here, people who are not here. Um, you know, especially I want to thank, you know, Jackie, our symposium manager. Um, uh, I can't tell y'all, you know, how much like Jackie is. My goodness. So thank you. And people look out for her, read her scholarship. She has an amazing article that was published a few months ago. We'll run it back again through our social media. To Julia, our associate director, and assistant to the Brown Chair, Molly Mingo, our social media manager, Braxton, who's not here but did the website, who did the tribute video, and you know, all the folks who, you know, manufactured and did our swag. I mean, I could just go on and on and on. My colleagues, Megan McIntyre, Maggie Fernandez, Kat Gray, Llewellyn Hallett. Thank y'all so much. Adam Pope, our department chair, Yahira Padilla, and you know, our advisory board at the CLC. I mean, you know, it really is like a team effort. And I'm only able to do my part in that because I know that I'm not alone. And that is what I think a lot of people feel right now. And as they said in the last session, we're supposed to feel. We're supposed to feel, you know, like that we're by ourselves. And so I hope that as people leave here, that that's the thing you can take with you. And I really, really do mean this. We are here. Like we are called the Community Literacies Collaboratory and we are here. You know, please reach out to us, connect with us, attend the events, get on our newsletter. You know, if nothing else, you know, people who've been at our possibilities hubs and our workshops, they'll tell y'all, like, if nothing else, it's a time that they can come and find their folks. You know what I mean? And that we all not only deserve that, we need that right now. And so, we need it always, but especially now. And that is, what we do. Apply for the grants, send those papers into the sandbox so we can publish them. Uh, you know, um, uh, come to the next symposium, do the call for papers when we send it out. Because that is, what we're all about. So Tony K. Bambara, another thing she said, and this is where I'll end, is she often when she signed books, she would sign them as she would say, take care of your blessings, which like kind of also was an acronym of her name, Tony K. Bambara, TCB, take care of your blessings. And Essex Hemphill, the poet, would do the same. And, the work that we do here through the CLC and the work that we have done here, you all, like who presented and just attended, is do just that. We have taken care of our blessings. Our blessings are each other. And so I hope as people leave this place, looking forward already to 2 years from now when we gather again, to know that like, you can I hope you are able to take something with you that is a seed that you can plant to do something that, only you are here to do and make possible. If you've already got something going, that we've given you something to be able to water that seed and to grow it. And, just, yeah, know that are loved, you're cared for, you are appreciated. And thank you, everybody. We'll just stop there. And thank you, Gwen. We love
Thank
you so
you.
much.
Love you.